Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Friday with Vistage webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining the webinar session, please dial support at 888-259-8414. When you join today's webinar, you selected to join either by phone call or computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your question into the questions pane of your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce today's moderator, Dave Nelson.
Welcome, members and guests, to Fridays with Vistage. I'm Dave Nelson, a 14-year Vistage member, CE676 in Pittsburgh, and your webinar host. Today we're talking about your website's speed and security and how it might be sabotaging your sales. Our guest today is Tyler Yost, the Director of Client Services at Blue Corona. Hey, Tyler, welcome to Fridays with Vistage.
Great to be here, Dave.
Let me tell people a little bit about your company. So Blue Corona helps small and medium-sized businesses, in other words, Vistage-sized companies, grow faster than their competition using next-gen technologies. Blue Corona itself is now a 6-time Inc. 5000 recipient and has helped hundreds of businesses grow by providing the highest value marketing services to their clients. Today, if you've got a question, do type it in the questions box. You might have to click the little triangle so it points downwards instead of sideways in that GoToWebinar control panel. And we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So Tyler, tell us about Marketing Smarter.
All right, thanks, Dave, and thank you everyone for joining us today on our Fridays with Vistage webinar. Really excited about talking about how your website speed and security might be, and there's a good chance they are, sabotaging your sales. Our whole theme this year with our sponsorship with Vistage has been all about competitive analysis and digital competitive analysis. And as we've been meeting with Vistage groups across the country and doing workshops as well as the Vistage Executive Summits, we've really had a handful of big aha moments happen as we're talking about this in the room. And I think the first big one, and the one that sets the stage the best, is all about how your website is helping people make decisions about you, whether they want to hire you and become your customer, whether they want to come and work for you, whether they want to invest in your business. And based on all the surveys that we see, we know that all three of these are really important to Vistage members this year in trying to help grow their businesses and find and recruit more talent. Now, the next big aha moment is that it's not only your website that they're making decisions on, but it's also your competitors. And so we're seeing that we're all competing for these same sets of resources, whether it's customers, employees, or investors in the same space. And that people are making decisions about you, whether you like it or not, based on your web presence. And so why I'm really excited about this today is because website speed, website security, and we're actually going to talk about a bonus third part, mobile friendliness, are three elements that can help you catapult your growth in each of these areas past your competitors. And it's also something that not a lot of people are paying attention to. As we're doing the workshops and the Executive Summit series, we get a lot of people coming up to us after that saying, man, I didn't really realize how many people are actually making decisions about that, or how I use that in my own day-to-day decision-making process. And so part of us shining a light on this today is to, show you an area where you may not be as familiar with, help you get an understanding of what it is and how to make an impact out of it. At the end of the day, talk is cheap. We want to make action happen here. And so, like I mentioned, our entire theme this year is all talking about digital competitive analysis. And so what we've done is we've analyzed 2,000 small and medium-sized businesses, and like Dave said, Vistage-esque businesses, and we put them through this competitive analysis framework. Because as we got to talking to different members about this, what we realized is that there's this ocean of data available to us, and a lot of it's available for free. But how in the heck are we going to navigate it? And so first I want to take a step back to talk through, all right, how do we navigate it a little bit? And then dive really deep on the section that's going to talk about, again, site speed, website security, and mobile friendliness. So as I mentioned, we've analyzed 2,000 companies using this framework. So it's been battle tested, if you will. And I'm actually going to share some of those insights as we go through each of these sections today and really show you how much it can impact your business. So as we look through the framework, it has 5 key parts. So the first part is looking at tracking and analytics. And so we see tracking and analytics as the net that surrounds your entire web presence. Again, people are making decisions based on your web presence, whether to hire you, whether to come work for you, whether to invest in your business, based on your web presence. And so tracking and analytics helps us get an understanding of who are those people, where are they coming from, what are they doing when they get there, and what does some of that look like. And so as we're putting some of these analyses together, the output looks a little bit like this, where we can get a really quick understanding quantitatively of what your company versus a handful of your competitors look like based on the number of tracking and analytics tools that you have. And so this helps us get a good idea of who's making an investment in some of this. You know, are there any competitors that are doing a decent job of it? And then we can overlay on top of that the qualitative information to understand what are they doing, and if it aligns well with where you're trying to go as a business, maybe that's something we could take advantage of and help you catapult your growth there. So that's intra-group. And then since we've looked at 2,000 companies, we have a really good grip on what are all the tracking and analytics tools that are available out there, and maybe make some recommendations that somebody else in your competitive landscape doesn't have. And so we really have seen a lot of value happen in not only just starting to look at this, but then start to understand how do we bake some of these different tools in a crawl, walk, run fashion to help you guys beat the competition. Because at the end of the day, we're all competing for the same resources. So we love Vistage members and want them all to win. The second part of the 5 parts of our competitive analysis framework is looking at website accessibility. And this is where we're going to spend the majority of the time today, and we're going to go a mile deep in this. So I just want to spend a very short amount of time looking at this one today. And some of the output of this is looking at how fast your website is, how mobile friendly your website is, and what your website security looks like. And so here's an example that we've put together where we can see everyone's got a mobile friendly website. It's 2017. I hope you all do too. But some of them aren't focused on their website security. And company B in this example seems like there might be a little bit of a laggard. So it still gives us a chance to oversee them and really see a win on that part of it. Again, we're going to spend a lot of time on this one. The next section that we look at is your website's content. And so we look at not only the depth of the amount of pages that you have, but also the breadth of each page. So we're looking at how many pages that you have, how many words per page do you have, how many inbound links are you seeing, are you blogging, and what do each of those look like for your competitors. Oftentimes, this may show us that nobody's really doing anything. So that gives us a big aha moment to say, all right, well, we can catapult all the competition by doing something. Or we might see, like in this example, there's one competitor that has made a significant investment in that versus the rest of us who are a little bit laggard. So what can we learn from them, and how can we use that to the best of our ability? Now, paired with that, in our next section, we like to look at search visibility. So I don't know how many of you use Google on a daily basis, but I'm going to assume it's all of you. Google is the dominant search engine, capturing the majority of search traffic. And we like to look at, can you be found, right? We want to help businesses grow. And like Dave mentioned, we're a 6-time Inc. 5000 recipient, and that's all based on helping our clients continuously grow using all the different parts of the web. And so when we talk about search visibility, what we mean by that is, out of the bucket of keywords that best describes your business, how do you rank on the first page of Google? Over 70% of all of the clicks on Google happen on the first page. So if we're not there, we're not being found. And so the output looks a little bit something like this, where we can see that our company is not doing too bad. We've got about 20% search visibility. We've got one competitor, company C. If you remember on the last slide, they were the ones making a significant investment in their content. It's just a little bit bigger. So it seems like they might have a misguided content strategy for getting them found online, which leads to an opportunity for us. Or it may give us a way to supersede them. So as we've done some of these analysis, have seen landscapes where we've got all the members at 50% plus. We've seen some where we're at 30, 40, 50%, and our competitors are at almost zero. So we've got a good first mover's advantage. Let's keep winning there. But by looking at all of this, we're able to get a really rich understanding of who's making an investment there and how can we beat them. And so then the last part of our framework is looking at social audience and reviews. So like I said, there are decisions being made about your business based on your entire web presence. So not only what happens on your website, which is really where accessibility, content, search visibility come into place, but also what's happening online outside of your website. So if we're looking at trying to get more sales, we might look at Facebook and LinkedIn. If we're trying to hire more people, we'll see what's happening on Glassdoor, and we've seen a lot of really interesting things happening there. And the output looks something like this, where we can get an understanding of how many people are following you in each of these areas. Are we leading? Are we a laggard? And then we also like to look at, in this instance, how many employees do we have on LinkedIn? So we could start to see some of these really interesting ratios starting to happen. So all 5 of these screenshots are actually from the same competitive analysis. And so that company C that was making really big content investment saw a little bit of a bump in search visibility, really isn't doing a lot in social media. But company D, who wasn't doing any of those, has an enormous presence on Facebook and LinkedIn, and they don't have very many employees relative to the rest of the competition. So we can start to get an understanding from a 30,000-foot level of what is the competition doing and how do we navigate all of this. And again, all 5 parts of these help us get a really rich understanding of what's happening in the competitive landscape online and what can we do about it? How do we take action on it and how do we navigate it? And so again, going back to the ocean of all this data that's available to us, we found that these 5 areas help create a great summary level look at you and your competitors in all of these areas. And so as we switch gears here, we're going to talk a lot about accessibility today. And that's really where the title came in, of seeing how website speed and website security are probably sabotaging your sales. As we've gone to our workshops, our executive summits, and been talking to Vistage members, giving the aha moment that I might not even be paying attention to this, we've started to see that something that they're probably not paying attention to even more is their website's accessibility. This is a silent killer, if you will, that's pretty easily remedied. So as we go through each of these sections today, we're going to start to see what is it that we're looking at, how do we understand it and measure it, and how do we take action on it to improve it compared to our competitors. All right, sorry, I got a little verbose on those 2 sections. All right, so let's talk about what makes up accessibility. So we see accessibility at a summary level as having 3 main parts: your website's speed, your website's mobile friendliness, and your website's security. And we're going to spend time talking about all three of these. Again, from a summary level perspective, these are great ways to dip your toe in the water to understand how is your website being accessed by its users. There are several other dimensions we can add to the accessibility section, but these are really the first great three for us to understand on these ones. So one of my favorite questions to ask to a Vistage member as we're talking about, like, why do I need to invest in my website? Do people actually look at it? I don't know if I buy the fact that people are making decisions about it, but all right, we'll focus on that. My favorite question is, what is the number one reason that you think people leave a website? And what we've seen is that the number one reason, 40% of consumers will leave your website if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. Your website speed is the number one reason someone's going to leave your website. So how does this sabotage your sales? Well, it's really two parts. On the first part, it's if you're paying all this money to try to get somebody to visit your website and they leave, well, now you've wasted all that opportunity, right? So we're reducing the number of visitors that we're getting. And then if you've got a slow user experience, you're going to see a decrease in your conversion rate across it. So it hits both parts of your sales funnel. The top part of it, which is how many people are looking at us, and the second part of how many people are actually going to convert into leads and sales for us. So again, that number is that 40% of consumers will abandon a website that takes longer than 3 seconds to load. And so that's a great aha moment, right? The number one reason people to leave is that it's slow. But how many websites take longer than 3 seconds to load? So that's where our analysis of those 2,000 members comes in. And what we found is that only 30% load faster than 3 seconds. Than 3 full seconds. You get 3.99 seconds. Only 30% of all of those 2,000 that we've analyzed are faster than that 3 seconds. And you probably experience it in your day-to-day, right? You open a website on your mobile phone, takes a minute or two to load. You might open a new tab. You might switch to something else. You might leave entirely. Well, that's happening today to your website. And so usually as those two facts come together, there's a little bit of look of panic of, all right, well, how fast is my website? And how do I even make any changes about that? And so there are two great tools that we like to use in really measuring the website speed, right? Because if you don't know how fast your website is, you really can't take any action on it. You might be at 2.5 seconds. You might be at 27 seconds. And so the first tool that we like to look at is a tool from Google called Google PageSpeed Insights. I really like this tool for somebody who's dipping their toe in the water to understand what's going on with their website speed. They make it very accessible, very easy to understand because they do two key things. Number one, they give you a score from 0 to 100 about how fast your website is. And so it's pretty easy to know, like back in high school, you get a high grade, things are great. In this instance, you get a low grade, you get a 21 out of 100, you're not doing so hot. But then what they also layer on top of it is a lot of example actions that you should be taking specifically about your website to help you improve that speed. So if you're really new to this, trying to hand this over to somebody on your team or one of your vendors to try to help you improve your website speed, this is a really easy way to say, hey, this just doesn't look like we're doing a great job. 21 out of 100, anybody can get that right. So again, if you're really new to this, I recommend using the Google PageSpeed Insights tool. It's really easy to find. You just Google PageSpeed Insights. It'll be the first result. You can put your URL in, click Analyze, and it'll give you a result like this where it'll show you how fast your website is in a mobile experience as well as a desktop experience. And we'll talk about why mobile is important in the next section, but they're both important for you to keep an eye on in this. So if you're a little bit more advanced and you want to see some more detail about all of it, my second favorite tool is called GT metrics. So this is actually using that exact same website that we looked at last time, in the last slide, excuse me, and it gives you so much more information about your website's speed. So it not only gives you the Google PageSpeed scores, which is that big red F, that's the desktop score we didn't see. We saw the mobile score on the last slide. It also looks at another tool called Why Slow, similar to Google's PageSpeed Insights, and you get all those recommendations with it. But then you also get how long does it take to load, how big was the website, and it even gives you what's known as a waterfall diagram, where you can point to the exact part of your website loading to say, this is what's making us take so long. So again, if 40% of people are leaving websites that take longer than 3 seconds to load, and we've seen that only 30% of all websites take less than 3 seconds to load, I can't even imagine how many people leave this website that takes 27.7 seconds to load. I mean, that's just silly. The first, I love this example because it's in such an extreme, but as we've looked at a lot of websites, we've seen some commonalities where we see websites that are 12, 14, 16, 30 seconds to load. We've seen some that take 2 whole minutes to load everything. And that's just causing issues on your website's ability to help keep people on your website who visited, right? So you don't want to bounce where somebody just comes to your website and then leaves. But then also in your user experience. I mean, there are probably very few companies that have a one step. I'm going to come to the page and I'm going to fill out the form right there, and that'll be it. I'm going to get in contact with them. There's usually a couple steps in the process of conversion. You want to have them know that you know what you're doing. You have a contact form, and so in a couple of steps here, we're going from a website that's very easy to use in 3 seconds and 3 seconds per each page versus one that's almost 30 seconds each page. So I've got to imagine there are very few people who are that patient to go through all of these steps at 30 seconds a page, unless you are the only company out there providing it. So again, as we look at it, when we make an analysis of a Vistage member or and some of their competition, what we'll get is an output that looks something like this. And so this is using those Google PageSpeed Insight scores to get an initial understanding of how well your company and your competitors are doing, both on mobile speed, which is in blue, and desktop speed, which is in purple. And so in this example, we can clearly see that company D is leading the landscape, but neither of their scores are above a 70. We've seen really big success when those scores on the desktop go over 80 and the mobile go over 70. So that still tells us, that little piece of information tells us that we've got a big shot here to be the landscape leader. Companies B and C are probably asleep at the wheel. It's going to be 2022 before they even realize that their websites are slow. But we, and the Smart Vistage members know now that we've got an opportunity to win here. And so one of my favorite examples is a client that just came into us where we showed them this beforehand, and these were their exact scores. So this is the Google PageSpeed Insights tool. Again, on the mobile side, they saw 38 out of 100, and then in desktop speed, they saw 36 out of 100. And these scores really aren't that surprising. With a lot of the changes in website development we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years, we've actually seen websites that are easier to manage on mobile devices, but take longer to load, which has been an interesting output of that. So we went ahead with this client and did some significant optimization of their website where to the end user, the experience looked the same, except for the fact that it was so much faster. And so the output here was that we were able to get their mobile speed up to an 80 and their desktop speed up to an 89. So, those are pretty big wins. If you look at red versus green, that's pretty easy, but I like math. I like real hard numbers. I wanted to know how much faster, right? Let's pull the stopwatch out and see what we look at. Before we made the optimizations, they were running at 9.7 seconds to load. So that 3 second mark where 40% of consumers leave a website because it's too slow. Well, they're far beyond that, right? They're at 10 seconds. Not as bad as our last example of almost 30 seconds, but still pretty bad. After we're able to optimize and get their scores at 80 and 89, we're able to get them down to 2.5 seconds to load. And that generated a humongous win for them. On the visit side, we saw their bounce rate decrease. We also saw their conversion rate lift with that, and really see some big wins on that. And again, this is something that we deal with every single day, but we don't do the best job of identifying that it's really something that is important for us to get more sales or to find more employees or find better investors. I don't know any investors in small and medium-sized businesses that like to wait. And with all of the primary young talent being millennials, I don't think they like to wait either. So this is a really big chance for all of you to make improvements in your website speed and see great results out of it. All right, so I want to summarize everything really quickly on site speed, and then we're going to jump into our next section on mobile friendliness. So the first piece, and I've said it 3 or 4 times, I'm going to say it again, is that if your website takes longer than 3 seconds, 40% of your users are going to abandon. We've seen this time and time again, and the curve gets even steeper the longer that it waits. The second piece is that only 30% of the websites that we've surveyed load faster than 3 seconds. So if you're not paying any attention to this, and a lot of your competitors aren't paying attention to this, there's a chance that you're in that 70% that are taking 4+ seconds to load. You're like our example earlier that takes almost 30 seconds to load. So the action on your end is to test and address your website speed. You can use Google PageSpeed Insights, and if you're new to this, I'd recommend you start there. So again, very easy, very accessible, something that you can ship to your web development team or your marketing partner. Say, hey, here's what I've seen out of this. I think they even have a little button at the bottom to send to my developer. So very easy to understand, and they actually will send you email updates if anything changes or if there's any new insights about website speed. So keeping that important. So first, as you test and address the website speed, and then, of course, implement the recommendations, right? So it's not just good to know, man, I got a 30 out of 100, or I've got a 25 out of 100, or I've got a 60 out of 100. Make the recommendations happen. Primarily, the ones we always see are about your website's images. Everyone thinks that hosting is effectively free and bandwidth is effectively free. So they put these humongous, beautiful images on their websites that are unoptimized. And I don't have the stat on here, but it's probably north of 80% of all the websites that we monitored have images that need to be optimized. So I would bet dollars to donuts that that's going to be in one of your recommendations. And then finally, the fifth part, and one of the takeaways that we didn't really talk about a whole lot is that it's important to track, test, tweak, and repeat this whole process. So make sure you have an understanding of what your website speed is today, either using the Google PageSpeed Insights tool or GT metrics. Make a test to see how much impact do we get out of each of the recommendations from all of those. Image optimization is one of the fastest and easiest ones, and we've seen really the biggest impact there. Make those tweaks and constantly repeat this process. There are things that are happening to your web presence every single day from either your internal web team or a web vendor that are probably slowing you down. And so it's important to maintain and monitor that at least once a quarter. If you're like us, you look at it every single day, but there's always an in-between on what those look like. So something like GT metrics, you can actually log in and create an account, and it'll automatically test your website speed for you and send you email updates. So I have it set up for bluecorona.com, and it sends me any updates if it goes below a certain threshold. And I'm also monitoring some of our competitors to see, all right, are they doing anything that's slowing them down? And if so, well, let's get some speed on that. All right, that's website speed. The middle piece that we're going to talk about and spend just a brief period of time on is about mobile friendliness. So one of my favorite questions to ask about mobile friendliness is, how much web traffic do you think comes from mobile devices? As Dave and I were talking before we started on today, we're at the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, right? 2017, the iPhone is 10 years old. I mean, I remember the first time it came out in 2007 and it was all the rage. But now our phones live on us, right? They are with us at all times. My wife knows where I am at all times because of mobile devices. But how much web traffic do you think actually comes from mobile devices? And so the stat we have here is actually from a study in 2016. So I imagine these numbers are even bigger. We haven't closed out 2017 yet. But 57% of all US traffic came on a mobile device last year. Plus an additional 11% came on tablet. So more than 2/3 of all website traffic in 2016 was being accessed through a mobile phone or a tablet. And I can't wait for the 2017 numbers to come out just to see how much greater that mobile number has grown. And so for those of you who might be a little bit less familiar with mobile friendliness, mobile unfriendly looks something like this, where this is a website where you get the full website experience on your mobile phone. Right? You got to pinch and zoom. Again, when the iPhone came out 10 years ago, they didn't even have pinch and zoom, right? I remember that taking a little while for that to happen. But there are still websites that look like this. A mobile-friendly website, and one of our favorite examples with Vistage members is obviously Vistage.com, where it's very easy to use. I don't have to pinch and zoom. I can read it very easily. It fits on my device, and it serves it just that way. And so what we found is, again, we did our study of 2,000 small, medium-sized companies, is that 24% of all the websites that we looked at are not mobile friendly. 25% of them are not mobile friendly. Now imagine from a conversion rate perspective, you're sending somebody to that full-size website and they have to pinch and zoom and find your phone number or find your contact form. Well, your conversion rate is going to be less because of that. And we have additional studies to show some of those pieces. And then on getting you traffic, one of the important pieces is that Google made mobile friendliness a requirement. So if you're not mobile friendly, there's a darn good chance you're not getting traffic from Google on mobile phones. And the more embarrassing part about it is that Google made it a requirement in 2015. We're like 2.5 years later, and there's still 24% of all the websites that we looked at aren't mobile friendly. And so when we look at it and doing an analysis, we end up seeing something like this when it's not mobile friendly, where we've got our company, not a mobile friendly website, company B and company D do have something mobile friendly, company C, not so much. On the flip side, more times than not, we'll see something like this, where the landscape has gone fully competitive, where all the members of the landscape are mobile friendly, very easy to use, very easy to understand. But if almost a quarter of all the companies that we looked at aren't mobile friendly, there might be a chance that you look more like the example we just looked at. And so, again, this isn't one that's impacting the broadest spectrum of people, but it is something to keep an eye on. And so one of the best tests to do it comes straight from Google. It's called Google's MobileFriendly Test. It's a pretty creative name. It's very simple to use. Like the Google PageSpeed Insights, the MobileFriendly Test is very simple. You put your URL in and it spits you out a result that looks something like this, where if it's not mobile friendly, it's going to tell you big red, not mobile friendly, and it's also going to give you what you need to make that happen. And so this is an example of actually a institution of higher learning that doesn't even have a mobile-friendly website. Again, it's 2017. If you're an institution of higher learning, I would hope that you have a mobile-friendly website. And so as we close out this section again, quickly, we've got a couple of things I want to highlight. The first is it's 2017. You're expected to be mobile-friendly. 57% of all web traffic last year came on mobile devices, right? So if you're not mobile friendly, you're missing out on half. right? And you're missing out on having a rich experience for that half of users who have a mobile device and are trying to look for what you're doing, especially if it's in the early stages of trying to find, which vendor do I want to go with, whether you're B2B or who do I want to buy from if you're B2C. And what we found in our analysis is that 24% of websites aren't mobile friendly. So similarly to website speed, it's important to test and address your website's mobile friendliness. This is one that should be pretty simple for everybody to understand. You go and use the Google's mobile friendliness tester, make sure you're mobile friendly. If not, then implement the recommendations and always track, test, and tweak and repeat those recommendations. Sometimes we've seen websites where somebody had a mobile friendly website and somebody on their web team made some inadvertent changes that all of a sudden made them not mobile friendly. And so that's why it's important to monitor this one. I would say quarterly as well. If you've got a website that's being visited very frequently in high volumes, monitor it more frequently. But really always keep an eye out for this one. The most simple way to test your mobile friendliness is pulling up your website on your mobile phone in your pocket. If you want to make it a bit more adventuresome, disconnect from the Wi-Fi and really see how long that load time is. And always keep an eye on that one. All right, the last one, and the one that I think is the most silent of all the killers, is your website's security. Are you protecting your website's users? And so website security is this big gray cloud that lives over your website. And what I'm going to talk about today is not back-end website security, so protecting your website and creating defense around it from hackers and other groups. Instead, we're going to talk about protecting your website and your website's users in the way they communicate. And so you've probably seen this before in what's called the HTTPS protocol. Right? So if you've used any e-com store online and you've looked at the URL bar, you've probably seen something like this before, where it says HTTPS //www.website.com. And we've seen a tremendous uptick in the interest in what's called SSL, which is the kind of certificate that you'll need to become to get this HTTPS over the last really year and a half to 2 years. So your users, your website's users, are really going to see this and experience this in their browser. And we've seen big changes in 2017 from both Google in their Chrome browser and Mozilla in their Firefox browser, and Microsoft's going to make one in their Edge browser, updates where they're going to highlight websites that are using HTTPS. So you get this beautiful green lock to tell everyone, hey, this is a secure connection. Your communication with me is secure. No one can listen in on it. No one's going to be able to get in front of it. Your ISP just knows that you came to my site, doesn't know what pages you visited, doesn't know how you interacted. This is going to become a new badge for all these websites to say, hey, we're on your side. We want to provide you a great user experience. If you're not secure, it looks something like this in your browser. So it'll say, this website is not secure. And then those browsers, again, have started to roll out a new feature where they show the red triangle, which to me says this is something I need to keep an eye on and be alerted about, rather than the wonderfully comforting green lock. And so as we look at website security, again, it's really getting an SSL certificate for your website and making sure that's optimized. That's the second and slightly harder part. And then always maintaining this HTTPS protocol for your users. And so this impacts, again, your website's users being able to get to you, as well as their user experience. So we just looked at the user experience and how that's being changed right under our noses. And as for getting in front of them, what we saw is back in September of last year, so we haven't even made it a full year, about 20% of all of the results on Google were HTTPS, right? And that's really the ones that were high, the rest of them weren't. Earlier this year, in April, almost half of them are HTTPS. So feel free once you leave to go look at, search a query that should talk about your company and see how many of the results are HTTPS versus HTTP. Google came out giving some initial guidance saying that HTTPS is going to be more favored. And they started to say that last year. They did the same thing for that in 2014 and even at the end of 2013 for mobile friendliness before they made it a requirement. So we're taking this as an indication that website security is probably going to become the new mobile friendliness, where we want to leave the laggards behind, we want to get in front of it, take advantage of it before all the competition does. And so as we went through and looked at those 2,000 members, small and medium-sized companies in our analysis, what we found is that 76% of those websites aren't using HTTPS protocol. And we see it pretty consistently across a lot of competitive landscapes where no one is doing, has HTTPS or using the SSL certificate to make that happen. And so as we look at our website security, these are all the red locks overlaid actually on top of the mobile friendliness. We see a lot of landscapes that look like this. So everyone's invested in making their website mobile friendly, but haven't yet made it there to make their website secure. So that's a chance, again, for all of you listening today to catapult the competition and really be in the lead there. Oftentimes, though, especially with e-commerce, we'll see groups that look like this: full competition across mobile friendliness and website security. And so we decided to put this to a test on our website. And so I'm going to show you our own data on the next slide. And so back in September, we decided, fine, we'll bite. We'll go secure. Our competitors are all going secure, so it's good for us not to be the last one there. And you'll see right there, we went secure. And our organic traffic jumped 30%, pretty much in a week from that one change. And it's been that way since. We're almost a full year later, and we saw a 30% bump in that. I don't know many business owners that wouldn't like a 30% bump in their visits, leads, and sales based on one tactic. And this one is one definitely to jump on, especially if you're in a competitive landscape that no one else is doing this. And this is exactly what we're seeing. So September 2016, this was taken right before we made our website secure. And then right afterwards, we saw the exact results here, where the search engine results are really reflecting and benefiting companies that are secure. So in my opinion, in my general esteem, HTTPS is the new mobile friendliness. And I'm telling it to this crowd because I know that Vistage members grow faster than the competition, and this is another way for you guys to get a jump on the competition. And what we saw in our analysis is that only 24% of all those websites that we looked at are secure. So unlike mobile friendliness, which had only 24% of those websites not mobile friendly, this one's the exact opposite. That we're still in the early stages here where going secure is probably going to have a big benefit for you where you're not following up. So I'm going to be really bold here, and that if you're not HTTPS, convert to HTTPS like yesterday. I know it's Friday afternoon, so you're probably making your list for next week. This is something that needs to be on the list for next week. Checking to make sure you're HTTPS, very easy to do. Just pull up your website and see what the browser says. And if you're not HTTPS, put it at the top of the list. We've seen humongous results out of our own traffic, again, 30% bump. And we've seen that consistently with a lot of our clients. Sometimes it's a little bit smaller if the competitive landscape is already HTTPS, and sometimes it's bigger than that. But we've seen bumps regularly and consistently just based on that. And now that it's becoming part of the norm in a user experience, you don't want to be the last one who's not secure. And the same thing, like I mentioned, with site speed and mobile friendliness, you're going to want to track it, test it, tweak it, and repeat it. HTTPS, depending on the way you implement it, could reset itself every 90 days. That's the quick, cheap, easy, friendly version way to do it. There's a tool called Let's Encrypt, which will help get your website as SSL certificate, but it automatically resets every 90 days. If you go buy a website certificate, SSL certificate from a big vendor like a GoDaddy or another domain vendor, they might do it once a year. But it's important to keep an eye on that, or else you're going to lose the footing that you've put together. All right. Whew. Making good time here, Dave. All right, so let's talk about taking action and learning more. So if I summarize everything, I've got 7 key points. First one is that people are making decisions based on your web presence, whether they want to use you as a consumer of yours, whether they want to come work for you, whether they want to invest in your business. If any one of those is important to you, it's important to keep an eye on your web presence. This is one of the big aha moments that we get at executive summits and doing workshops, talking to Vistage members. A lot of times they say, wow, I didn't realize that and can't believe I didn't pay much attention to that. So if you aren't paying attention to it, well, I hope we've opened your eyes a little bit on the fact that it's important to pay attention to. When we talk about website speed, if it takes longer than 3 seconds, 40% of consumers are going to abandon your website. And of that, 30% of the websites that we've analyzed are faster than 3 seconds. So there are 70% of all those websites that have a big shot to go after in keeping all those customers that they paid so much money to come in and acquire. On mobile friendliness, in 2016, 57% of that traffic came from mobile. Again, I can't wait until we come up with our 2017 numbers as we begin to do our workshops and executive summits in 2018. But I can't even believe how quickly that's grown. We're at the 10th anniversary of the iPhone. They're on everyone's desk in everyone's pocket. And so you've got to believe that it's important. And that 24% of all websites still are not mobile friendly. So check and make sure that that's not you. You're expected to be mobile friendly, and if you aren't, it's a chance to get ahead of the rest of the laggards. Number 6, website security, HTTPS, is becoming the new mobile friendly. I can't wait for when 2019 happens, and we'll look back at this point in 2017 and say, I told you so, told you that website security was going to be there. And there's a big first mover advantage that's still available today, because 76% of all the websites that we've analyzed aren't secure. And so the big ta-da moment, if you will, is I want to get one of these summary digital competitive analyses in all of your hands. And as part of our partnership this year with Vistage, we're providing complimentary summary digital competitive analyses to any Vistage member that requests one. So if you want to know what all of these insights are, as well as insights on the tracking and analytics section, content, search visibility, social audience reviews, I want to get that into your hands so you can start to see what all that looks like and take action on it. And we did this only for Vistage members because we know you'll take action on it. There's a lot of other businesses that talk the talk, but you guys walk the walk. We know that Vistage members outgrow their competition, and we want to help accelerate that progress. So if you'd like to get one of those, head over to bluecorona.com/Vistage. You can click on the little member button on there, and it's got a form right in the middle. It takes less than 2 minutes to fill out, and that'll get that all in our team's hands, and we'll put together a complimentary summary competitive analysis for you. If you have any other questions after the fact, feel free to email me. My email is really simple, tyler@bluecorona.com. We got to see a Blue Corona on Monday, so that's exciting. But blue is in the color, Corona is in the beer. And with that, Dave, I'll open it up to questions.
All right, brilliant. Folks, if you've got a question, you can just click into the GoToWebinar control panel, click the little drop-down triangle next to the questions and type it, and we'll pick it up. I also want to point out while you're looking at that GoToWebinar control panel that there is a section for handouts, and you can grab the PDF of this presentation right now. I think you're going to want to send that to your IT team if you're not handling this directly yourself. And of course, the recording of the audio plus the slides together will always be available at vistage.com/webinars, usually starting about the middle of the week after our recording. So it should be there by roughly next Wednesday. So share this with the people in your organization that can take action on this stuff. Hey, by the way, you said something up front, Tyler, that I thought was really interesting when you referenced Glassdoor. That's something that I talk about a lot. It's a place where people go to review their employers, their bosses, they share salaries, they talk about the interviewing process, and I was just curious, so I checked the worldwide and U.S. ranking on Glassdoor. It is now number 105 of all of the websites in the world, 105. So your reputation on Glassdoor really matters for people who might not have heard of that before. So thanks for mentioning that.
Of course.
Can you talk a little bit, Tyler, about how mobile friendliness has changed over time? And specifically, a lot of people might remember when they had a URL structure where it was m.mycompany.com. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of mobile friendliness. And I will also emphasize, while you've talked about, I think you said 57% of traffic being mobile, that's the small screen. There's the additional tablet traffic in there, which you also referenced. So it's really about, I think we got to say about 2/3 of the traffic is no longer coming from the desktop. So talk about mobile friendliness over time and any further thoughts on what you think people should be doing.
Yeah, Dave, that's, it's interesting. We've been doing these studies of groups of small, medium-sized businesses ever since we got started almost a decade ago. And so, probably 2014, when Google started to give some guidance on this, we added that to one of our analyses. And if I remember correctly, what we saw at the time is that it was really broken into thirds, right? So of all the companies that we analyzed, it was broken into thirds, where a third of them had the M.dot structure like you were talking about, a third of them had a responsive website, and a third of them still had the full screen, full-size screen like we see today. So we've seen the M.dots go away, and that was part of some of that guidance that we've seen, and really become those responsive sites. So that piece grew significantly, and then we also saw those who had the full size grow as well. So we've seen that growth happen pretty regularly, especially when we started looking at it significantly in 2014, 2015, 2016, and now again in 2017.
Yeah, I would add, just to summarize, that the M.dot, well, that was, m.mycompany.com, that was the original way that we handled mobile in the beginning. That's really not a good idea anymore, because you're dividing your traffic into yet more pages. And anytime you're dividing, that's not good from a Google rankings perspective. And so with a responsive design, your site comes back to a single set of pages that display properly on any size device. So you really want that responsive design, not the old M.dot. I wanted to just get a quick question in here from Rebecca, who is curious. She says, when is the deadline to request the report? In other words, how long is that a standing offer to Vistage members? Because we'd like to make some changes first. You gave us a lot of good tools right out of the gate. So Rebecca's going to do a little cleanup before she asks for the analysis. So is there a particular time frame that offer for the free analysis? When does that end?
Yeah, so that ends at the end of this year as of right now, so we've still got a little bit of time left. If you're in somebody like Rebecca's shoes, I'd actually recommend requesting one beforehand and afterwards to see, how much change really happened. Sometimes it's almost like a little external audit where you can see, all right, they did something, but did we get something out of it? but yeah, at the end of the year to answer that question. But the sooner you can get on it, the sooner you can take action on it.
Excellent. While we were talking earlier on and talking about things like the the speed of page load, Dahlia wanted to know what are the implications of the other's computer, the actual person accessing, and don't they have to have a decent system too, or how does that affect things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it always goes back to the faster you can make your website, the faster that experience happens, regardless of what connection you're on, what kind of system you're on. And so as we've actually gone through and done all of our speed testing, we actually tested on 3 different types of devices, and we test it through a multitude of different networks. So we'll test it on a server architecture that's on an ultra high-end connection, which will kind of shows you the fastest point-to-point speed. So it's not me here in Charlotte, North Carolina on a spotty Wi-Fi. It's as best as you can get, all the way through some, remember 3G phones. We'll test some of those level of speeds as well. But we see a pretty good distribution of devices like that. And as we look at our clients' data, see a decent number of them who aren't connected to a hardline or a Wi-Fi. So that's why it's always important to try to get your website speed as fast as you can from a pure server perspective. And then, the rest is really kind of outside of our hands. We're hoping for the best, but that's not really anything that we can control.
Excellent. All right, Christina has a great question here because I think I know the answer, but let me throw it to you. Does site security have relevance for non-e-commerce sites as well?
Yes. Yes, period. Yes, yes, yes.
That's what I thought. I thought you were going to say that, Tyler, and it really is critically important, isn't it?
It is so critically important. Any place where so if you have a contact form on your website, so let's say you're not doing e-commerce, you want an SSL certificate. You want to be secure because that's doing 2 things. One, if anyone's trying to intercept that information, well, you are not at fault for them intercepting it. They can, some other website can be. So, you're creating that rock solid connection between who's trying to give you that information and your website. So that's important, as well as we've seen the amazing results on the improved visit side of things. So if you're even self-interested in trying to get more visits out of it, you should definitely do it. But from a user experience perspective, absolutely. If there is any way for anyone to give you any bits of information, which today they give up a lot of information just by visiting your website, not even putting anything in, you want to make sure you've got an SSL certificate and you've gone HTTPS. But yes, period, underscore, underline, bold, in big, bright headlines.
Okay, excellent. Let's go with one last question because we are coming up on the top of the hour, but I think this is a great question that is probably in a whole bunch of people's minds. JP asks, how do you find the right company to create a website and then search optimize it, keyword optimize it? What kind of questions or what kind of criteria would you suggest, Tyler, as people are evaluating potential vendors? Because, I'm sure we all get the call pretty much every week. Hey, we can put you on page 1 of Yahoo, Bing, and, Google. There's so many people out there that claim they can do this.
Yeah. I think, the first thing I always like to look at is do they walk the walk, right? If they say, hey, I want to get you on the first page of Bing, Yahoo, and Google, can they do it for themselves? I mean, search engine marketing is the most cutthroat search visibility place. So if they can't do it for themselves, well, how are they going to do it for you? Of course, it depends on what you want to get out of it. So, a lot of our clients love, the way we handle our relationships, the way we try to act as though we're your internal marketing team that's not in-house. And so they love that kind of stuff. They love the value that we provide. But again, it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to try to do it for $100 a month, good luck. But, I think always going after somebody who's got some industry expertise as well. who knows your industry. So for example, we work really great with companies that are local. I would call them a local business, whether they're a local business of one or a collection of local businesses across the country, like franchises. But yeah, ask them for case studies, ask them for references. And one of the things I love about everything we do here at Blue Corona is we're just unbelievably transparent. You ask us for that stuff, we'll share that with you if we think it's going to be a great partnership. But yeah, I would ask, you can always take a look at what they're looking at. So for things like website security, mobile friendliness, and speed, well, we're certainly, if I'm going to talk about it, we're going to walk it, and that's what we do. So always take a look at, do they do what they say they're going to do? Do they have any great examples that kind of fit with what you're looking for? And can they provide any references of real people you can talk to that don't sound like family members? Sometimes you see that too happen. So yeah, I think that's what I'd recommend.
All right. So with that, we'll wrap it up. JP, what I would suggest, just to put my own twist on what Tyler has said, is if you get a potential vendor and ask them for 5 examples of their clients, and then Tyler mentioned a whole bunch of tools, many of which come from Google, which can analyze not just your own website but any website. Go see how well a particular vendor actually scores with their clients' websites. I would say that would be the ultimate proof. So Tyler, thank you for, first of all, a lot of great resources, a great presentation, and a really thought-provoking hour.
Oh, you're welcome, Dave, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope we had a really valuable hour, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, as always, you can access past recordings at vistage.com/webinars. And we're going to be back with the next Fridays with Vistage on September 29th. We're going to be talking about fostering engagement using employee feedback with an expert, Megan McNamara. And let's just say on behalf of Tyler Yost and the entire team at Vistage Worldwide, I'm Dave Nelson. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time at Fridays with Vistage.